And speaking of getting his hands on things, Chris Butler is out to launch once again and has his hands on a bunch of interesting footage for us. What do you have for us tonight?
Well, actually, we've got an awful lot. It's exciting stuff, maybe the most exciting kinds of stuff there can be with launches. Now, space probes, satellites, telescopes, all of them are exciting, but there's nothing much more exciting than launches involving human beings, human space flight. And we got a couple of those and stuff leading up to human space flight all going on this month to pay attention to. So let's launch right into it. First things first, we've got the old space launch system. The Space Launch System is the rocket NASA has been building for a very long time. This is a rocket that's intended to take human beings back to the moon and maybe even farther into deep space. It's a big deal. They've been building this rocket for a long time. Now, it's had its critics because it's taken a long time and it's been over budget and so forth, but they had their first really important test of what they call the core stage, the center part of the Space Launch System. They put it up on a test stand on March 18th and tried firing its 4 engines. Now, they'd done that just last month previous to that, and they had a cutoff. They didn't get the full length of the test that they wanted. But on March 18th, when they pressed the magic go button, everything indeed worked. The rocket is over in the test stand that you see to the right. You can see the orange top of this core stage. The 4 giant engines at the bottom of it are firing down into a trough of water, which is exploding into steam. That's what you see, that big cloud going off to the side. They fired the engines for 8 minutes and it worked this time. They're feeling a lot more confident about the Space Launch System. And so this stage, now that it's been verified to work, is going to be sent from Mississippi, where this test was done, to Florida, to the Kennedy Space Center in the Vehicle Assembly Building, where they're going to attach 2 giant solid rocket motors that are waiting for it, boosters like the ones the space shuttle used to have. And then after that, they're going to put on top of it the Orion spacecraft. Now, that's meant to carry people. It won't carry people on its first flight, which is aiming at November of 2021, but it will be a flight around the moon, orbiting the moon, a spaceship designed to carry human beings. So if that flight, which is called Artemis 1, is successful, then down the road, maybe another year down the road, we'll see, they're going to try putting people on it, and it'll be the first flight of people back to the moon since I was, I think, 8 years old. So this is pretty exciting stuff.
Quick question for you, though, Chris. Is this
Yeah,
something you think we can be thankful for maybe next Thanksgiving, where we're going to be able to see
yes,
some footage of an American spacecraft designed by to have humans in it on the far
yeah,
side of the moon? Now
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's great news.
Oh, absolutely. You think about that. One of the pictures we have seen all of our lives is the Earthrise out the window of an Apollo spacecraft. Well, Orion is essentially the Uber Apollo. It's a bigger version of the Apollo, but we're going to see that again on live television. And knowing that people are going after that, it's really exciting stuff. And it's about to happen. So fingers
Fantastic.
crossed.
Now, like you said, there are other big rockets out there.
Well, now, their competitors, of course, in all of this, just in recent years, SpaceX has come to the forefront and they are now building the Starship. Now, the Starship is every bit as big as the Space Launch System. They're both rivals to the old Saturn V that we remember from the Apollo program. SpaceX, however, is building a rocket that's designed not just to be able to go up into space, but also to come back and be reused. The old Space Launch System that they're building is a traditional rocket that's thrown away. Only the Orion spacecraft would come back. So what SpaceX has been doing down in Boca Chica, Texas, in South Texas, is testing something that's even trickier to do. They have their new version, their new test article of the rocket, which is serial number 11. Now, to remind you folks, the first full up test article was serial number 8. 8 launched, went up, belly flopped as it was supposed to, glided back down, turned around, tried to land, and blew up. Serial number 9 launched, went up, belly flop, came back down, and smashed into the ground and exploded. Serial number 10 launched, belly flopped, came back down, landed on its tail as it was supposed to, sat there for 8 minutes, and then exploded. All right, so the question is, what about serial number 11?
Ignition of all 3 engines, and let's watch and see what happens with the landing.
Okay.
They're at a kilometer in altitude, so here we go. Engines are getting ready. Here they go.
There was an orange.
Look at that.
Whoa!
Did it?
Our camera.
It hit the ground. Okay.
Our camera. Flying debris and pieces of Starship. There's stuff smoking on the ground in front of the camera. I switched to it here. We didn't get anything from SpaceX.
Ah! All right, that was not ideal. Okay, however, take the long view on this, folks. This is a really tricky thing to do. This isn't simple at all. They're going to have to continue with tests, of course, but they're going to continue with the tests. SpaceX was the first company ever to learn how to land a rocket of any kind coming back from space like that. So remember, they've done this work before, and that's why we test, as they always say. So they'll go right back out and try again with a new rocket, and hopefully this time it'll work.
Yeah, well, and let the folks at Boca Chica, they're getting tired of hearing those explosions. I'm sure they're looking forward to the day it works as much as SpaceX is. But what else has been going on out there? Anything else for us in space news?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I want to mention with regard to the Starship is that, of course, there might have been a little bit of jealousy between SpaceX and NASA on this. And for the very first time, we have got some of the NASA astronauts coming down to visit the big rocket. And here we have a nice post by NASA astronaut Christina Koch talking about how they're paying attention to what's going on with the Starship. Who knows? In 5 years, maybe one of them's going to be riding on that monster. So with the Space Launch System having had some schedule and cost overruns, there's a possibility that NASA is going to invest more heavily in this rocket as well. So that's an evolving relationship, and a sight of astronauts standing in front of that rocket is kind of a neat thing to see. But now that's not all we have. I should tell you, there's also the question of the big, gigantic booster stage that goes under that. SpaceX is building that too. They're building the first test articles. So in 2021, we're going to see the booster stage that goes underneath a Starship also fly. Again, watch the news. These things are being tested very shortly. I also want to call attention to our Russian friends. The venerable and reliable Soyuz spacecraft will be carrying 2 cosmonauts into space to the International Space Station on April 9th. But there's something even a little bit more special about it for those of us here at Griffith Observatory. A NASA astronaut, Mark Vande Hei, will be on board on his way to the station. And astronaut Vande Hei actually has visited us out at Griffith Observatory. He's come to some of our special events, and we consider him a friend of the institution. So a very special bon voyage and good wishes for astronaut Vande Hei and, of course, his cosmonaut teammates on the Soyuz launching on April 9th. Looking to American shores, we have the Dragon spacecraft, the SpaceX Dragon that carries the astronauts to the space station, and we're going to have a launch too. It'll be no earlier than April 22nd. The exact time of the launch, we don't know yet either. Again, watch the news here, and you can see the crew here of Megan MacArthur, Thomas Pesquet, Akihiko Hoshide, and Shane Kimbrough are going to be flying from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on their mission. And I should say, this spacecraft has been up there before. This is the first reuse of a Dragon spacecraft and the first reuse of a spacecraft to carry people since the Space Shuttle program. This spacecraft has been named Endeavour by its first crew. Astronauts Hurley and Benken had flown aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour, loved her, and so they named this Endeavour. So it's not just a flight for the Crew 2 mission for SpaceX, but also it's a reflight of Endeavour. Good luck to them. For those of you who want to see a launch yourself, if you're going to be staying in Southern California, I do have one possibility for you, and it's just a possibility. Vandenberg Air Force Base is up the California coast in the center of California. You see it marked there on the map, right in the middle. Down below is the bend of the coast that goes past Malibu and all that. Of course, Los Angeles is just right off to the side. When the Air Force launches from Vandenberg Air Force Base, we can see those launches depending on the time of day, whether it's cloudy and so on. And they do have a launch coming up. Now, being a secret military launch, we don't know the details of the time, but we do know that this is the Delta IV Heavy. We talked about the Starship. We talked about the Space Launch System. Well, right now, this is just about the most powerful rocket on Earth. It's a big deal when it launches. We don't know what it's carrying. It's for the National Reconnaissance Office. It's a secret military payload, but it is scheduled to go in April. So if you Google in launches, launch schedule, launches near me, or go to spaceflightnow.com or spaceflightinsider.com, they have a list of schedules. And as soon as the Air Force is willing to announce when this launch happens, we'll have a heads up for it. But just be watchful of that. Keep your eyes to the skies. And in the meantime, I'm out to launch. Thank you.
Well, just a fantastic rocket report. Thank you again, Chris. The Delta IV, I've always wanted to see one of those in person launch, which maybe I'll try and get up there and see it. Unfortunately, at Vandenberg, there's not a vantage point for the public that you can see the engines ignite. The Delta IV does something super interesting. A bunch of the fuel is sort of surrounding the rocket as it launches, and it looks like it lights itself on fire. It
looks really bad for a moment, doesn't it?
It sure does, but there's nothing wrong with it. That it's doing what it does.
True.
But take a look for this launch if you're in the area. There are places you can get to, but don't expect to be able to drive onto the base. Don't expect to get too close. But if you do a little Googling, you can find a place where you have a clear view once it clears the hills and you get to experience the rumble. It's great fun.